The Harmon house had been empty for as long as I could remember. It sat at the end of our cul-de-sac, a two-story colonial with peeling paint and an overgrown yard that all the neighborhood kids said was haunted. My parents said the bank owned it after the previous owners defaulted on their mortgage, and it had been sitting on the market for years. Nobody wanted to buy it because it needed too much work. But then last summer, when I was 15, a family finally moved in. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday morning, and my mom made me go over with a welcome basket of muffins. She said it was important to be good neighbors. I walked up the cracked driveway and rang the doorbell. A woman answered, maybe in her late 30s, with a tired smile and paint-stained hands. She introduced herself as Mrs. Harmon and thanked me for the muffins. I asked if she had any kids my age, and she said yes, 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. She called them down to meet me. They appeared at the top of the stairs, all pale with dark hair and strange, blank expressions. The oldest looked about my age, the middle one maybe 12, and the youngest was probably 9. Mrs. Harmon introduced them as Thomas, Elizabeth, and Michael. They stared at me without saying hello, and I felt uncomfortable under their gaze. I made an excuse about needing to get home and left quickly. Over the next few weeks, I'd see the Harmon kids around the neighborhood, but they never played with anyone. They'd just stand in their yard watching us or sit on their porch in a silent row. The other neighborhood kids thought they were weird, and we started avoiding walking past their house. But one evening in late July, I was shooting baskets in my driveway when Thomas appeared. He asked if I wanted to come over and play a game. I was surprised, but figured I should try to be friendly. I followed him to his house. Elizabeth and Michael were waiting in the living room. The house was barely furnished, just some old couches and empty rooms with boxes stacked in the corners. Thomas said they wanted to play hide and seek, that their parents had gone out and told them they needed to make friends. It seemed childish for teenagers, but I agreed to be polite. Thomas said he'd seek first, and Elizabeth, Michael, and I could hide anywhere in the house except the attic. He covered his eyes and started counting. I ran upstairs and found a bedroom that looked unused. I slid under the bed and waited. The counting stopped, and I heard Thomas's footsteps moving through the house. Time passed, and I didn't hear anyone else get found. I was starting to get bored and was about to give up when I heard Thomas enter the room I was in. His feet appeared next to the bed, and I held my breath. Then I noticed something strange. His feet weren't moving naturally. They were hovering slightly above the floor, just barely, like he was floating. I bit my lip to keep from gasping. The feet moved away and out of the room. I waited a few more minutes, my mind racing, telling myself I'd just seen things wrong in the dim light. I crawled out from under the bed and headed for the stairs. The house was too quiet. I called out that I was giving up and asked where everyone was. No response. I checked the other rooms upstairs, then went down to the first floor. The living room was empty. I called again, louder, starting to feel genuinely worried. Then I heard a child's giggle from somewhere above me. I looked up at the ceiling. The giggling continued, moving across the ceiling like someone was crawling up there. But I was on the first floor, and above me should have been the bedroom I'd just been in. I walked to the base of the stairs and looked up. At the top, in the darkness of the second-floor hallway, I could see 3 figures standing perfectly still. Thomas, Elizabeth, and Michael, all staring down at me. Elizabeth spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "You're not very good at hiding." Michael added, "We always find everyone eventually." Thomas took a step down the stairs. "Want to play again?" I ran for the front door, yanked it open, and sprinted across their yard to my house. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, gasping for breath. My mom asked what was wrong, and I tried to explain, but it sounded ridiculous even to my own ears. She thought I'd just gotten scared playing games in an unfamiliar house. But that night, I looked out my window across the street at the Harmon house. All 3 kids were standing in the upstairs window, motionless, staring directly at my house.
The next day, I told my friends what happened. We decided to investigate. 5 of us marched over to the Harmon house that afternoon and knocked on the door. Mrs. Harmon answered and seemed confused when we asked to talk to her kids. She said it was just her and her husband, and they'd bought the house as a fixer-upper. We insisted we'd met them, that I'd been inside playing hide and seek just yesterday. She looked at us like we were crazy and closed the door. We stood on the sidewalk, confused and freaked out. My friend Jake suggested we check the county records at the library to see who'd lived in the house before. We found old newspapers from 15 years ago. There had been a family named Harmon living in that house, parents and 3 children named Thomas, Elizabeth, and Michael. One night, the parents went out to dinner and left the kids home alone. When they returned, all 3 children were dead. The police report said they'd been found in various hiding places around the house, all suffocated. The investigation concluded that they'd been playing hide and seek and had somehow gotten trapped in their hiding spots, unable to call for help. The parents were cleared of suspicion, but the tragedy destroyed them. They moved away shortly after. I went home that night and kept my curtains closed, but around midnight I heard tapping on my window. I was too terrified to look, but the tapping continued, rhythmic and insistent. Finally, I worked up the courage to peek through the curtains. Thomas, Elizabeth, and Michael were standing in my backyard, looking up at my window. Thomas mouthed the words, "Ready or not." That was 6 months ago. The new Mrs. Harmon still lives in that house, still claims she has no children, but the neighborhood kids know better now. We've all seen them at various times, standing in yards, peeking through windows, following us from a distance. They're always trying to get us to play. 3 kids approached me last week, asking if I wanted to come to their house. I recognized them from another street, and I knew they'd probably been lured in by the Harmon children. I ran before I could find out what happened to them, because I learned something that night I played hide and seek in that house. Some games never end. Some players never leave. And if you're not careful, you might become part of the game forever, standing in the shadows, whispering, "Ready or not," waiting for someone new to find you.
I was 12 when Emily invited me and 3 other girls to her birthday sleepover. Emily had just moved into a new house on Oakwood Drive, one of those big colonial homes with multiple floors and way too many rooms for a family of 4. Her parents were the type who let us do whatever we wanted, as long as we stayed inside and didn't break anything. After pizza and cake, we were sitting in Emily's room trying to figure out what to do. Someone suggested truth or dare, but Emily said she had a better idea. She wanted to play hide and seek in the dark. The whole house would be fair game, except her parents' bedroom. They were already asleep upstairs, and she said we needed to be quiet enough not to wake them. We turned off all the lights on the first and second floors, except for a small lamp in the living room where the seeker would count. Emily volunteered to seek first, since it was her house and she knew all the best hiding spots. The rest of us scattered when she started counting. I ran upstairs and slipped into the guest bathroom, crouching in the bathtub behind the shower curtain. My heart was racing, even though it was just a game. I heard Emily finish counting and announce she was coming. Her footsteps moved through the downstairs, and I heard her find Sophie hiding in the coat closet almost immediately. Then I heard them both searching together, their whispered voices and giggles echoing through the house. I stayed perfectly still in the bathtub, barely breathing. Minutes passed. I heard them find Jasmine in the laundry room, and then all 3 of them were searching for me and Madison. Their footsteps came upstairs, and I tensed as they approached the bathroom. The door opened slowly, and I could see Emily's shadow through the translucent shower curtain. She paused, and I was certain she would pull back the curtain and find me, but instead she left, closing the door behind her. I waited a few more minutes, feeling proud of my hiding spot. Then I heard Madison shout from somewhere that she gave up and was coming out. I decided to stay hidden a bit longer, thinking I'd win this round. That's when I heard the crying. It was soft at first, barely audible, coming from somewhere in the house. I thought maybe one of the girls had gotten scared or hurt themselves. I pulled back the shower curtain and climbed out of the tub. The crying was clearer now, coming from down the hall. It sounded like a young child, maybe 5 or 6 years old. I opened the bathroom door and stepped into the dark hallway. The crying was coming from the room at the end of the hall, a room Emily had mentioned was going to be a home office, but was currently empty. The door was cracked open, and I could see a faint light coming from inside. I walked slowly toward it, calling out softly to ask if someone was okay. The crying stopped abruptly. I pushed the door open wider and looked inside. The room was completely empty, except for a few unpacked boxes in the corner. No furniture, no lights, nothing that could have been making that glow I'd seen from the hallway. I was about to leave when I heard a voice behind me whisper, "Found you." I spun around, but the hallway was empty. My skin crawled. The voice hadn't sounded like any of my friends. It was too high-pitched, too childlike. I backed out of the room and headed quickly toward the stairs, calling out for Emily. When I got downstairs, all 4 girls were sitting in the living room eating cookies and laughing. They asked where I'd been, saying they'd looked everywhere for me, and eventually gave up. I told them I'd been in the bathtub the whole time, but Emily frowned and said she'd checked there twice and even pulled back the shower curtain. I insisted I'd been there, that she must have somehow missed me, but deep down I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Sophie asked why I looked so pale, and I told them about the crying and the voice in the hallway. They all laughed, saying I was trying to scare them. Emily said there were no little kids in the house, just her teenage brother who was sleeping in the basement. We decided to play another round, and this time Madison was the seeker. I didn't want to go upstairs again, so I hid behind the living room couch, tucking myself into the small space between it and the wall. The house went dark and quiet as Madison counted. I could hear the other girls running to their hiding spots. Then Madison finished counting and began her search. I heard her moving through the kitchen, opening cabinets and checking behind doors. Then I heard something else. Footsteps on the second floor, small and light, moving quickly across the ceiling above me. But all of us were on the first floor. I knew where everyone had hidden. Emily ran to the dining room, Sophie went to the basement, and Jasmine was somewhere in the hall bathroom. The footsteps upstairs moved to the staircase and began descending. I peeked over the couch and saw a small figure coming down the stairs. It was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a white nightgown. Her hair was long and dark, hanging in front of her face. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there completely still. Madison walked past her without seeming to notice, continuing her search in the kitchen. The little girl's head turned slowly in my direction. She started walking toward the couch. I pressed myself harder against the wall, my heart hammering. She walked around the couch and stood right in front of my hiding spot. She crouched down, and for the first time I saw her face. Her eyes were completely black, like empty holes, and her skin was gray and mottled. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, and she whispered, "My turn to hide." I screamed and scrambled out from behind the couch, knocking over a lamp in the process. Everyone came running. The lights flicked on, and Emily's parents rushed downstairs in their bathrobes, demanding to know what was happening. I was sobbing, pointing at the couch, but when everyone looked, there was nothing there. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but I could tell from their faces that they thought I was either lying or had fallen asleep and had a nightmare. Emily's mom made us all hot chocolate and told us it was probably just the stress of playing scary games in the dark. But Emily looked troubled. After her parents went back to bed, she pulled me aside and told me something that made my blood run cold. She said the previous owners had moved out suddenly last year. The real estate agent had mentioned that their young daughter had died in the house, some kind of accident involving the stairs. The family couldn't bear to stay after that. Emily's parents got the house for a really good price because of its history, but they decided not to tell Emily because they didn't want to scare her. Emily found out by Googling the address and finding old news articles. The little girl's name was Hannah, and she was 6 years old. Emily pulled up one of the articles on her phone and showed me a photo of Hannah. It was the same girl I'd seen.
The same long dark hair, the same white nightgown she'd probably been wearing when she died. None of us slept that night. We stayed in the living room with all the lights on, watching movies until the sun came up. Around 4 in the morning, we all heard it, small footsteps running back and forth in the hallway upstairs, followed by a child's laughter. Emily's parents slept through it somehow, or maybe they just pretended to. We never played hide-and-seek at Emily's house again. In fact, Emily's family moved out less than a year later. She told me later that the footsteps and laughter had become a nightly occurrence, and her younger brother had started talking about his new friend, Hannah, who wanted to play games with him. When I asked Emily where they moved to, she said her parents had decided to rent instead of buy. She said they wanted to make sure they could leave quickly if they needed to. I understood exactly what she meant.
It was a rainy Wednesday in October when our regular gym teacher, Mr. Patterson, called in sick. We filed into the gymnasium expecting to just sit around or maybe play dodgeball, but instead there was a substitute teacher we'd never seen before. He was tall and thin, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and glasses that made his eyes look too big. He introduced himself as Mr. Harding and said he had something special planned for us. He told us we were going to play hide and seek, but with a twist. He called it predator and prey. The gymnasium would be divided into zones using the equipment, creating a maze of hiding spots. One person would be the predator and would hunt the others. If you were caught, you'd become a predator too. The last person remaining would win. Most of us were 14 or 15, and hide and seek seemed childish, but Mr. Harding had this way of talking that made it sound exciting and intense. He started pulling out all the gym equipment, mats, benches, climbing ropes, the big foam blocks we used for tumbling. He arranged everything into a complex maze that took up the entire gymnasium. He turned off most of the lights, leaving just a few emergency lights glowing dimly near the exits. The space transformed into something eerie and unfamiliar. He said we had 5 minutes to hide while he stepped into his office. He would be the first predator. The rules were simple: no leaving the gymnasium, no going into the locker rooms, and if you were tagged, you had to help hunt the others. We scattered into the maze he'd created. I found a spot behind a stack of mats near the back wall, squeezing into a narrow gap that was almost completely hidden. My friend Kevin crouched nearby behind some benches, and I could see Sarah climbing up into the basketball hoop area where some rope nets were hanging. Mr. Harding's door opened, and I heard his footsteps entering the gymnasium. He didn't say anything, didn't announce he was starting like normal teachers would. He just began walking slowly through the maze. I heard him find someone quickly, probably Tom, who always picked obvious spots. Then there were 2 sets of footsteps hunting together. Time passed strangely in the dark gymnasium. I couldn't see my watch, and the emergency lights cast weird shadows that made everything look distorted. I heard more people getting caught, their surprised yelps followed by the sound of multiple footsteps moving together. The gymnasium got quieter as fewer people remained hidden. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. At one point, Mr. Harding walked right past my hiding spot, so close I could have reached out and touched his leg. But he didn't look down, and he moved on. I waited several minutes before relaxing slightly. Then I heard Kevin's hiding spot get discovered. He was dragged out from behind the benches by 2 students who were now predators, and I heard Mr. Harding's voice say, "Good, find the others." There was something in his tone that bothered me. It wasn't the encouraging voice of a teacher supervising a game. It was colder, more serious. I peeked out from my hiding spot and watched as the predators spread out. There were now 5 or 6 of them, moving in coordinated patterns like they'd done this before. But our class only had 20 students, and I'd heard far fewer than that get caught. Where were the others?
I decided to risk moving to a better spot. I crawled out from behind the mats and made my way toward a section of the maze I hadn't explored yet. As I moved, I passed an area where several climbing ropes hung from the ceiling. One of them was swaying slightly, even though there was no breeze in the gymnasium. I looked up and froze. Sarah was hanging there, suspended in the air by a rope wrapped around her neck. Her face was purple, her eyes bulging, her mouth open in a silent scream. She wasn't moving. I opened my mouth to scream, but someone grabbed me from behind, clamping a hand over my mouth. It was Marcus, another student from my class. His eyes were wide with terror, and he shook his head frantically, pulling me behind a stack of foam blocks. He whispered so quietly I could barely hear him. He said this wasn't a game. He said Mr. Harding wasn't a real teacher. He said 3 students had already been killed, and if we didn't get out of the gymnasium, we'd be next. I wanted to think he was crazy, that this was some elaborate prank, but I'd seen Sarah hanging there. That was real. Marcus said we needed to get to the exit, but the predators were guarding all the doors. The only way out was through Mr. Harding's office, which had a door that led directly to the hallway. We crawled through the maze as quietly as possible, trying to stay low and avoid the predators. I could hear them moving around, their footsteps unnaturally synchronized. We passed another body, a boy named James, lying face down behind some benches. His neck was bent at an impossible angle. I felt bile rise in my throat. Marcus grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. We were getting close to Mr. Harding's office. We could see the door slightly ajar, light spilling out from inside. We just needed to cross an open space of about 10 feet. We waited for a moment when the predators seemed far away, then made our move. We ran across the open space and threw ourselves through the office door, slamming it shut behind us. The office was small and cramped, filled with filing cabinets and old gym equipment. The door to the hallway was on the opposite side. We ran for it, but Mr. Harding stepped out from behind a filing cabinet, blocking our path. He smiled at us, and I saw that his teeth were too sharp, filed to points. His eyes behind the glasses were completely black. He said we'd played the game very well, but it was time to accept our loss. Marcus shoved me toward the door and threw himself at Mr. Harding, tackling him. He screamed at me to run, to get help. I fumbled with the door handle, finally got it open, and ran out into the hallway. Behind me, I heard Marcus screaming, then sudden silence. I ran down the empty corridor toward the main office, shouting for help. The secretary looked up in confusion as I burst in, hysterical and barely coherent. I told her something terrible was happening in the gymnasium, that students were being killed. She immediately called for a lockdown and phoned the police. The police arrived within minutes and stormed the gymnasium. When they came out, their faces were pale. They found 12 bodies, students who'd been strangled, necks broken or suffocated. The predators who'd been hunting were actually the first victims, their deaths made to look like they were still moving through some horrible trick. Marcus was dead too, his body found in the office, but Mr. Harding was gone. The office door that led to the hallway was locked from the inside, and there was no other way out. He'd simply vanished. The school shut down for 2 weeks. Counselors were brought in, and there were memorial services for the victims. The police investigated, but found no record of anyone named Mr. Harding ever working as a substitute teacher in our district. The security cameras in the gymnasium had mysteriously malfunctioned during that class period, showing nothing but static. Mr. Patterson, our real gym teacher, swore he'd never called in sick that day. He'd shown up to school and been told by the principal that a substitute would cover his class because of a scheduling conflict he knew nothing about. I'm 19 now, and I still have nightmares about that day. I see Sarah hanging from the rope, Marcus fighting to save me, the bodies hidden throughout that maze. The police never found Mr. Harding, and they eventually closed the case as an unexplained mass casualty event. But sometimes I look up substitute teachers in other school districts, checking their photos online, and sometimes I see him, different name, different school, but the same face, the same glasses, the same cold smile. And I wonder how many other gymnasiums have been turned into hunting grounds, how many other students have played his game. I've tried reporting it, but no one believes me. They say it's trauma making me see things that aren't there. But I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere, in some school, Mr. Harding is setting up another game. The predators are counting, and the prey are hiding, and none of them know that they're not playing hide and seek.
My older sister Rachel babysat me every Friday night when our parents went to their book club. I was 10 and she was 16. She usually let me stay up late and watch movies I wasn't supposed to see, which made Friday my favorite day of the week. One night in early spring, we got bored with TV and Rachel suggested we play hide and seek. Our house wasn't that big, but it had a long hallway upstairs with a bathroom at one end and 4 bedrooms. The catch was that every room had a mirror, big ones. My parents were obsessed with mirrors. There was one in every bedroom, plus 3 in the hallway itself, and of course the bathroom had a massive mirror above the sink. Rachel said she would seek first, and I had 2 minutes to hide. I ran upstairs and tried to think of the best spot. I didn't want to hide in my room because it was too obvious, and the guest room had no good hiding spots. I settled on our parents' walk-in closet. I buried myself behind hanging coats and held my breath. I heard Rachel's footsteps coming up the stairs, and then I heard her checking each room methodically. She was taking her time, making spooky sounds to try to scare me. Finally, she opened the closet door. I tried to stay perfectly still, but she yanked the coats aside and tagged me. "Found you," she said, grinning. "My turn to seek." I covered my eyes in the kitchen and counted slowly to 100. When I finished, I called out that I was coming and began my search. I checked the obvious spots first, behind the couch, under the dining table, in the coat closet, by the front door. Nothing. I went upstairs and checked my room, then the guest room. No Rachel. I walked down the hallway, and that's when I noticed something strange. In the mirror at the end of the hall, I could see the reflection of Rachel standing in the bathroom doorway, but when I turned to look directly at the bathroom, no one was there. I blinked and looked back at the mirror. The reflection was gone. I felt uneasy, but told myself I had imagined it. I checked the bathroom anyway, pulling back the shower curtain and opening the cabinet under the sink. Empty. I moved to the next bedroom, which was Rachel's. I searched under her bed and in her closet, calling out that I was going to give up soon. No response. I walked back into the hallway, and that's when I saw it again. In one of the hallway mirrors, Rachel's reflection was standing right behind me. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. My heart started racing. I looked back at the mirror, and now her reflection was smiling. Not a normal smile, but something stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. I ran downstairs and called for Rachel, my voice cracking with panic. No answer. I grabbed my phone and tried to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't know what to do. I stood in the living room, breathing hard, trying to decide if I should call our parents or wait. That's when I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate footsteps in the upstairs hallway. I crept to the base of the stairs and looked up. Rachel was standing at the top, but something was wrong. She was standing completely still, and her head was tilted at an odd angle. I called her name, and she began walking down the stairs. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being pulled on strings. When she reached the bottom, she stopped in front of me. Her eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just solid black. She opened her mouth and spoke, but it wasn't her voice. It was something deeper, layered with static. "I found you," it said. I screamed and ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The deadbolt was locked, and I didn't have the key. Behind me, I could hear Rachel's footsteps. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife from the drawer. When I turned around, she was standing in the doorway, that horrible smile still on her face. I held the knife up and screamed at her to stop. And then, just like that, she blinked. Her eyes were normal again. She looked confused, scared even. She asked me why I was holding a knife, why I looked so terrified. I dropped the knife and started crying, trying to explain what I'd seen. She didn't remember any of it.
She said the last thing she remembered was hiding in the linen closet upstairs, and then she woke up standing in the kitchen. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Rachel. We sat in the living room with all the lights on until our parents came home. When we told them what happened, they dismissed it as us scaring ourselves with a game. But the next day, my dad covered every mirror in the house with sheets. He said it was because they needed to be cleaned, but I knew better. I saw the way he looked at his own reflection before he covered the bathroom mirror. He saw something too. We moved out of that house 3 months later. My parents said it was for my dad's job, but I think they were running from something. We don't talk about that night anymore, and I never look at mirrors for too long, because sometimes I swear I see something in them, something that looks like me but isn't quite right, something that's still playing the game, still seeking, still waiting for its turn to be found.
Urban exploration was our thing. Me, Kayla, Jordan, and Seth spent most weekends finding abandoned places to photograph and explore. The old Riverside Hospital had been closed for 15 years after some kind of malpractice scandal. It sat on the edge of town, surrounded by a rusted fence and overgrown parking lots. We'd been planning to explore it for months, and one Friday night in June, we finally did it. We parked a block away and squeezed through a gap in the fence. The building was massive, 5 stories of broken windows and peeling paint. We entered through a basement window that someone had already smashed open. Inside, it was dark and humid. Our flashlights revealed hallways lined with empty gurneys and scattered medical equipment. The walls were covered in graffiti, and the floor crunched with broken glass. We spent about an hour exploring the first 2 floors, taking photos and videos. Everything was going fine until Kayla suggested we play hide and seek. It seemed stupid at first, but Jordan said it would make for good content for her social media. We agreed on rules. Stay on the 2nd floor, no going into rooms marked hazard, and if someone found you, you joined the seekers. Seth volunteered to seek first. The rest of us scattered. I ran down a long corridor and ducked into what looked like an old patient room. There were 2 beds with rotting mattresses and an overturned wheelchair. I crouched behind a metal cabinet in the corner, trying to control my breathing. Minutes passed. I heard footsteps in the hallway, then voices as people were found. Eventually, I heard Kayla calling my name, saying the game was over. I stood up to leave, but then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. There was another cabinet on the opposite side of the room, identical to the one I'd been hiding behind, and someone was crouching behind it, just like I had been. I could see their shoes, dirty white sneakers sticking out from the side. I whispered hello, thinking maybe Seth or Jordan had hidden in here too, but the person didn't respond. My heart started pounding. I took a step toward the door, and that's when the person stood up. It was a man I'd never seen before, probably in his 40s, wearing a hospital gown that was brown with stains. His face was gaunt, and his eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's. He smiled at me, showing teeth that were broken and black. He whispered, "You found me." I screamed and ran. I burst into the hallway and sprinted toward the voices of my friends. They were at the end of the corridor, and when they saw my face, they knew something was wrong. I told them about the man, and Seth immediately said we needed to leave. But as we turned to head for the stairs, we heard it. Slow, shuffling footsteps behind us. We ran through those dark hallways, down the stairs, through the basement. Behind us, the footsteps followed, never speeding up, but never stopping. We could hear breathing, wet and raspy. We made it to the window we'd come through and practically threw ourselves outside. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. When we finally looked back at the hospital, we saw him. He was standing in one of the 2nd floor windows, just watching us. We drove away and didn't talk about what happened for a long time. Eventually, we reported it to the police, but when they checked the hospital, they found no evidence of anyone living there. They said we probably saw a homeless person and let our imaginations run wild. But I know what I saw. That man wasn't homeless. He was playing the game with us. And I think he's still there, waiting in that room, hoping someone new will come and find him. We never went back. Urban exploration lost its appeal after that night, because sometimes in those abandoned places, you're not alone. Sometimes someone is already there, hiding in the dark, waiting for their turn to seek.
I turned 11 on a cold October Saturday, and my parents let me invite 8 friends over for a party. We lived in an old Victorian house that my dad inherited from his grandmother, the kind with too many rooms and hallways that seemed to stretch longer at night. After cake and presents, someone suggested hide and seek. My mom said we could play anywhere except the 3rd floor, which was mostly storage and hadn't been cleaned in years. She said the floorboards up there weren't safe. We agreed, though I could tell my friend Marcus was disappointed. He always wanted to explore the forbidden places. I volunteered to seek first. I counted to 100 in the kitchen while feet thundered in every direction. When I opened my eyes, the house had gone completely silent. I found Sarah in the coat closet within 2 minutes, then Danny behind the living room curtains. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor and discovered 3 more kids in various bedrooms. That left Marcus and my friend Lily. I searched everywhere on the first 2 floors, calling out that I gave up, but neither of them appeared. I started to feel annoyed. The game had gone on for almost 20 minutes. That's when I heard it, a creaking sound from above, from the 3rd floor. My stomach dropped. I walked to the base of the narrow staircase that led up there and called Marcus's name. No response. I called for Lily. Still nothing. I knew they had gone up there despite my mom's rules. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning under my weight. The 3rd floor hallway was dark and smelled like old paper and mothballs. There were 4 doors, all closed. I opened the first one and found a room full of covered furniture and stacked boxes. Empty. The 2nd room was the same. The 3rd door stuck when I tried to open it, and I had to push hard. Inside was almost completely dark, except for a sliver of light from a small window. I was about to back out when I saw Lily standing in the corner, facing the wall. I laughed with relief and told her I found her, but she didn't move or respond. I walked closer and touched her shoulder. She was freezing cold, and when she turned around, her face was completely blank. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring through me like I wasn't there. I stumbled backward and ran into the hallway, shouting for help. My parents came running, and when my dad went into the room, Lily was sitting on the floor crying. She said she didn't remember going up there. She said the last thing she remembered was hiding in the bathroom downstairs, and then she woke up in that room. We never found Marcus. Not in the house, not anywhere. The police searched for days. They interviewed all of us kids separately, and I told them everything I saw. They seemed to think Marcus had run away, that maybe there was trouble at home. But I knew his family. They were good people. Marcus was happy. It's been 7 years since that birthday party. I'm 18 now, and we don't live in that house anymore. My parents sold it when I was 13. But last week, I got a message on social media from an unknown account. It was a photo of that 3rd floor room, the same one where I found Lily. In the corner, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure, someone standing exactly where Lily had been standing, facing the wall. The caption underneath said, "Still counting. Come find me." I zoomed in on the figure, and my blood ran cold. It was Marcus. He looked exactly the same as he did 7 years ago. Same clothes, same haircut, like no time had passed at all. I reported the account, but it was deleted before anyone could trace it. I don't know if someone is playing a sick joke or if something else is going on. But I do know this: I will never play hide and seek again, and I will never go back to that house. Some games don't end just because you want them to.